Have you ever opened a drawer that was not meant to change your life? Have you ever touched a piece of paper that felt heavier than it should? I found the letter on a quiet Sunday afternoon. It was not hidden carefully. It was not locked away. It was simply resting at the back of my mother's wooden drawer, beneath old scarves that still carried the soft scent of her perfume. The house was silent, the kind of silence that feels thick. My mother had been gone for 3 months. 3 long, slow months. I was still learning how to walk through her house without expecting to hear her voice. I was still learning how to open doors without hoping she would be on the other side. That afternoon, I was not searching for anything important. I was just cleaning, folding clothes, organizing small things, trying to make the house feel less frozen in time. Her bedroom window was slightly open. A thin curtain moved gently in the wind. Sunlight entered the room in soft golden lines. Dust floated in the air like tiny memories. I remember kneeling beside the drawer. It was the one she used for her private things. Not secrets, exactly, just personal things. Letters from old friends, photos she never framed, receipts from years ago. I pulled the drawer open slowly. The wood made a soft sound. Inside, everything was neatly arranged. My mother was always careful, always organized. Even her silence was organized. I moved the scarves aside. Under them, there was a small envelope. It was yellowed with age. The edges were slightly bent. My mother's name was written on the front, but not in her handwriting. I froze. There was no stamp, no address, just her name, written carefully, as if the writer had taken time to form each letter with care. My hands felt suddenly cold. I don't know why. It was just an envelope, just paper, but something inside me shifted. I sat on the edge of her bed. The mattress sank gently beneath me. I turned the envelope over. It was sealed, but not tightly, as if it had been opened before, maybe many times. For a moment, I hesitated. Was I allowed to read this? Was this private? Or was it meant to be found? I whispered softly into the empty room, "I'm sorry, Mom." Then I opened it. The paper inside was thin, fragile. It made a soft sound when I unfolded it. The handwriting was unfamiliar, strong, steady, not young, not careless. It began simply. My dearest Anna, Anna, that was my mother's name, but no one called her that. To me, she was Mom. To neighbors, she was Mrs. Carter. To friends, she was Anna only when they were laughing over coffee. But here, in this letter, the name felt different, intimate, alive. The letter was dated 37 years ago. 37, that was before I was born, before my father, before the life I thought I understood. I continued reading. The words were not dramatic, not poetic. They were quiet, honest. I hope this letter finds you in peace. I have replayed our last conversation in my mind 100 times. If loving you means letting you go, then I will try to be brave. I stopped breathing, letting you go. Who was this? My father's name was Michael, but this letter was signed by someone else. Always yours, Daniel. Daniel. I read the name again, slowly, as if it might disappear. I had never heard this name before, not once, not in childhood stories, not in family conversations, not in old photographs. Daniel did not exist in the version of my mother's life that I knew, and yet here he was, writing words that sounded like love, deep love, the kind of love that hurts quietly. The letter continued. I understand why you must choose the safer path. I understand the expectations placed upon you, but please know that what we shared was real. I will carry it with dignity. Safer path. Expectations. The words felt heavy. My mother had always seemed calm, steady, practical. She married my father when she was 26. They built a simple life, not perfect, but stable. There were no dramatic love stories in our family history. No great romance, no tragedy, just responsibility, just duty. At least that is what I believed. I read the last line. If in another life we meet again, I hope we are brave enough to choose differently. I lowered the letter slowly. The room felt smaller. The air felt different. My mother, my gentle, careful mother, had once been loved like this, and she had loved someone like this, and she had let him go. Why? I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the garden looked the same. The roses she planted were beginning to bloom. Everything seemed ordinary, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. I had always believed love was about stability, about staying, about choosing what makes sense. But this letter spoke of something else, a love that was strong, but not chosen, a love that was real, but not kept. I tried to imagine her younger, not as my mother, but as Anna, a woman with dreams, with fear, with pressure. What had she felt when she read this letter for the first time? Did she cry? Did she regret her decision? Did she ever wonder what her life would have been like with Daniel? Or had she closed that chapter completely? I sat back down on the bed, the letter still in my hands. Suddenly, I felt as if I didn't know her fully, and that realization hurt, not because she had secrets, but because I had never asked. I had accepted the surface of her story. I had assumed that the life she lived was the life she always wanted. But what if it wasn't? What if love for her was not simple? What if love meant sacrifice? As the afternoon light began to fade, I folded the letter carefully. I placed it back inside the envelope, but I did not return it to the drawer. Instead, I held it against my chest. I felt something new growing inside me. Not anger, not betrayal, but curiosity and a quiet sadness. How many stories do our parents carry that we never see? How many choices did they make that shaped our lives in ways we cannot imagine? That night, I did not sleep easily. The letter lay on my bedside table. In the darkness, I stared at the ceiling. My own relationship had ended 6 months earlier. I had walked away because it felt complicated, because it did not feel safe, because the future was uncertain. I told myself I was being practical. I told myself I was protecting my heart. But now, Daniel's words echoed in my mind. If loving you means letting you go, then I will try to be brave. Was letting go always brave? Or was staying sometimes braver? I turned to my side. The room was quiet, just like my mother's room had been earlier. For the first time, I wondered if love is not just about what we choose, but about what we are willing to risk. And as sleep slowly came, I knew one thing clearly. Finding that letter was not an accident. It was the beginning of a question about my mother, about myself, and about what love really means. The next morning, the house felt different, not because anything had changed, but because I had. The letter was still on my bedside table. I had placed a book on top of it before sleeping, as if to hide it from the dark, as if the dark might read it, as if the dark might judge me for opening something that was never meant for me. I made coffee the way my mother used to, 2 spoons of ground beans, boiling water poured slowly, no sugar. She always said sweetness should come from life, not from a cup. I used to laugh when she said that. Now, standing alone in her kitchen, I felt the weight of those small sentences she used to say without thinking. How many of her words carried hidden meanings? How many of her smiles hid old memories? I sat at the table and opened the envelope again. Morning light is honest. It shows details the night hides. The paper looked even older in daylight. I examined the handwriting more carefully. It was firm, deliberate. This was not the handwriting of a young, careless man. This was someone who knew what he was losing, someone who had already accepted it. I read the letter again, slower this time, trying to feel the spaces between the lines. I understand the expectations placed upon you. What expectations? From whom? From her family? From society? From fear? My grandmother had always been strict, traditional. She believed in stability, in reputation, in marrying someone suitable. My father was suitable. He had a steady job, a calm personality, a good family name. Daniel, whoever he was, might not have been. I finished my coffee and made a decision. There was only one person who might know something. My Aunt Margaret, my mother's older sister. She lived 2 towns away. We were not extremely close, but she visited often during my mother's illness. She had that same quiet strength, that same careful way of choosing words. I placed the letter back in the envelope, slipped it into my bag, and drove. The road to her house was familiar. I had taken it many times before, but this time, every mile felt like moving backward in time, back to a version of my mother I never knew. Aunt Margaret opened the door slowly. She smiled when she saw me, but her eyes studied my face carefully. "You look tired," she said. "I didn't sleep much," I replied. She invited me in. Her living room smelled like lavender. Everything was tidy, predictable, safe, just like my mother's house. We sat down. She poured tea. She always poured tea before serious conversations. I didn't know how to begin, so I didn't begin with words. I reached into my bag and placed the envelope gently on the table. Her hand froze midair. The tea trembled slightly in the cup. She looked at the handwriting, then at me. "Where did you find this?" she asked softly. "In Mom's drawer." Silence filled the room, but it was not an empty silence. It was heavy, full. Aunt Margaret leaned back slowly. She closed her eyes for a moment. "I wondered if you would ever find it," she said. So she knew. Daniel was real. "Who was he?" I asked. My voice sounded younger than I felt. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she stared at the window, as if searching for a memory outside. "He was different," she finally said. "That doesn't explain much." She smiled slightly. "No, it doesn't." She reached for the envelope but did not open it. "She met him when she was 22, Aunt Margaret began. They worked at the same bookstore in the city." A bookstore. I tried to imagine my mother surrounded by shelves of novels, laughing softly between customers, recommending stories to strangers. That image felt warmer than the version of her I knew as a careful housewife. "They fell in love quickly," she continued. "Too quickly?" What does that mean? It means it was intense, passionate. They talked about traveling, about moving abroad, about building a life that was uncertain. Uncertain. The word echoed. My mother and uncertainty did not belong in the same sentence. "She was happy?" I asked. "Ah, yes," Aunt Margaret said without hesitation. "She was very happy." The answer surprised me. Not because I thought my mother had been unhappy, but because I had never imagined her as someone who once chose happiness over safety. What happened? I whispered. Aunt Margaret sighed. Our father happened. My grandfather, a strong man, respected, feared. He did not approve, she continued. Daniel came from a modest background, no stable career, big dreams, too many risks. And Mom chose stability? She chose responsibility. The room felt colder. Did she regret it? Aunt Margaret looked at me carefully. Your mother never spoke badly about her life. She loved you deeply. She respected your father, but, I pressed, but sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she looked far away, as if part of her had stayed somewhere else. With him? I asked. Perhaps, Aunt Margaret said quietly. I swallowed. Why keep the letter? For the same reason we keep photographs, she replied, to remember who we were. The words stayed with me. Who we were, not who we are, not who we became, but who we were. She never contacted him again? I asked. No. Never? As far as I know, no. The certainty in her voice was gentle but firm. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that my mother had not lived a secret double life. Sadness that she had closed the door completely. I looked at the envelope again. Do you think she was brave? I asked. Aunt Margaret studied me. Brave in which way? For letting him go. She took a deep breath. Sometimes courage is staying. Sometimes courage is leaving. Your mother believed she was protecting everyone, even herself, especially herself. The answer was not what I expected. I had imagined sacrifice, but perhaps it was also fear of instability, fear of disappointing her family, and fear of choosing a path without guarantees. I stayed at my aunt's house for another hour. We spoke about small things after that, safe things, weather, neighbors, health. But under every sentence, the letter rested quietly on the table. When I left, she touched my arm gently. Don't judge her too quickly, she said. I'm not, I replied, but I wasn't sure if that was true. On the drive home, my mind was not on the road. It was on my own life. 6 months ago, I had ended a relationship with someone who wanted to move abroad, who wanted a different future. It felt risky, unstable. My job was here. My friends were here. My routines were here. So I chose safety, just like my mother. Or at least, that's what I told myself. But was it really safety? Or was it fear? When I arrived home, I walked straight to my mother's room. The drawer was still open slightly, waiting. I placed the envelope back inside, under the scarves. But this time, I did not hide it completely. I left it closer to the front, as if I was no longer afraid of it, as if I was acknowledging that love is not always simple, that sometimes the stories we inherit are invisible, but powerful. That evening, I stood in the garden. The roses were fully open now, soft pink, fragile, beautiful. My mother had once told me that roses bloom even after harsh winters. I used to think she was just talking about flowers, and now I wondered if she was talking about herself. And as the sun slowly disappeared behind the houses, I asked myself a quiet question. If I am ever faced with a choice between safety and love, will I choose differently, or will I repeat her story? I did not know the answer yet, but I knew this. The letter was no longer just hers. It had become a mirror, and I was finally brave enough to look into it. For the next few days, I tried to return to normal life. I answered emails. I cleaned the kitchen. I watered the plants. I spoke to neighbors about ordinary things. But inside me, something had shifted quietly. The letter no longer felt like a discovery. It felt like a question waiting for an answer. On the fourth evening after visiting Aunt Margaret, I found myself standing in front of the old bookshelf in my mother's living room. It was tall, dark wood, slightly worn at the edges. She had kept books from every stage of her life: cookbooks, classic novels, travel guides she never used, and at the very bottom, a row of old notebooks. I knelt down. Something inside me whispered that if there was one letter, there might be more traces, more fragments, more pieces of Anna, not Mom. Anna, the young woman in the bookstore, the woman who once considered leaving everything behind. I pulled the notebooks out carefully. Dust covered the covers. The first few were simple household lists, groceries, expenses, phone numbers. But the last one was different. It was wrapped in a thin blue ribbon. My heart began to beat faster. I untied the ribbon slowly. Inside, the handwriting was my mother's. Younger, lighter, less controlled. The first page was dated the same year as Daniel's letter. I felt my breath catch. This was not a formal diary. It was scattered. Thoughts written late at night, short sentences, fragments of emotion. I don't know if love is supposed to feel this overwhelming. I closed my eyes for a moment, then continued. He makes me feel brave, but bravery has consequences. Bravery has consequences. I repeated the words in my mind. Was that what she feared? Not love itself, but what love might cost. I sat cross-legged on the floor and kept reading. Father says I am being foolish. He says stability is more important than dreams. Stability again. The word felt like a chain passed from one generation to the next. Another page. Daniel says we can build our own stability. He believes in possibility more than certainty. Possibility, certainty. Two different languages, two different futures. I felt tears rise slowly, not dramatic tears, just quiet ones, because I could hear her conflict in every sentence. I wish I could split myself in two. One version to stay, one version to go. I stopped reading. The room felt too small again. I imagined her sitting somewhere, writing those words. Perhaps in that very room. Perhaps with her heart divided between love and duty. I thought about my own life. 6 months ago when Adam asked me to move with him. A new country, a new beginning. He had looked at me with hope and fear. I don't want to lose you, he had said. I told him I needed time, but what I really meant was that I needed certainty. And when certainty did not appear, I chose to stay. I told myself it was practical, responsible, mature. But reading my mother's words now, I wondered if I had inherited more than her eyes and her quiet nature. Maybe I had inherited her fear of uncertainty. I turned another page. The hardest part is not choosing him or my family. The hardest part is choosing who I will become. The sentence lingered in the air. Choosing who I will become. Love is not only about another person. It is about identity, about the shape of your own future. If she had chosen Daniel, she would have become someone else, a different wife, a different mother. Perhaps I would not even exist. The thought made me dizzy. My entire life rested on her decision to let him go. Every birthday, every memory, every ordinary morning, built on that sacrifice, or that fear, or both. I closed the notebook gently, and for the first time, I did not feel angry. I felt grateful. Grateful that she had chosen the path that led to me, even if it cost her something invisible. That night, I did something I had not done in months. I searched for Adam's number. My finger hovered above the screen. I had deleted our conversation history, but not his contact. Some part of me had never been ready to erase him completely. I did not call. Not yet. Instead, I walked outside. The night air was cool. The sky was clear. I remembered something Daniel wrote. If in another life we meet again, I hope we are brave enough to choose differently. Another life. We always imagine we have another chance, another version of ourselves somewhere. But we don't. We only have this one, this imperfect, uncertain life. I sat on the garden steps and asked myself a simple question. If I met Adam in another life, would I want to be braver? The answer came faster than I expected. Yes. The realization frightened me because bravery demands action, and action brings risk. Inside the house, my mother's notebook waited on the floor, her unfinished sentences, her unspoken regrets. Or maybe not regrets, maybe simply acceptance. I went back inside and opened the notebook one more time. The last entry was short. I will choose peace, even if it means wondering. Wondering, not regretting, not resenting, just wondering. Perhaps that is the quiet cost of safe choices. You gain peace, but you carry questions. I traced her handwriting gently. Did you find peace, Mom? I whispered. There was no answer, only the soft ticking of the clock. I stood up and walked to the drawer again. This time, I placed the notebook beside the letter, not hidden, not buried, side by side. Love and choice, dream and duty, past and present. Then I returned to my room. I picked up my phone again. My heart was steady now, not racing, not desperate, just calm. I typed a message. Hi, I've been thinking. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I pressed send. The message disappeared into the night, and with it, something inside me shifted. Not because I knew what would happen, not because I expected a perfect ending, but because for the first time, I was not choosing out of fear. I was choosing out of curiosity, out of honesty, out of a desire not to spend the rest of my life wondering. The phone remained silent, but I felt lighter, as if a quiet thread connecting past and present had finally loosened. I lay down in bed. The house no longer felt heavy, it felt alive, filled with stories, with mistakes, with courage, with compromise. And as sleep slowly came, I realized something new. My mother's story was not a warning. It was not a lesson about regret. It was an invitation to look at love with open eyes, to understand that safety and passion are not enemies, but choices. And tomorrow, whatever response I received, I would face it differently, not as someone afraid of uncertainty, but as someone who finally understood that love always asks something of us. And the real question is not whether we feel it. The real question is who we become when we answer it. The reply came the next morning. I saw Adam's name on my screen before I was fully awake. For a moment, I simply stared at it. My heart did not race. It did not panic. It felt steady, grounded, as if whatever happened next would be something I could carry. His message was short. I've been thinking too. Yes, let's talk. I placed the phone down and sat up slowly. Outside, the sky was pale gray, the kind of quiet morning that feels unfinished. like a sentence waiting for its final word. We agreed to meet that afternoon at a small cafe near the river, the same cafe where we had once talked about traveling, about starting over somewhere unfamiliar. Back then, the future had felt like a wide open road. Now it felt like a narrow bridge, still possible, but delicate. I arrived early. I always arrive early when I'm nervous. The cafe had not changed. Wooden tables, soft music, large windows facing the water. I chose a seat near the corner, somewhere private, somewhere honest conversations could exist without interruption. When Adam walked in, I felt something familiar move inside me. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just recognition. He looked the same, but also different. Perhaps that is what time does. It changes us quietly, without asking permission. He sat down across from me. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other. "I didn't expect to hear from you," he said gently. "I didn't expect to write," I replied. He smiled slightly, that small, careful smile I used to love. We ordered coffee. Simple, neutral, safe. Then he leaned forward. "What changed?" he asked. I thought about the letter, about my mother's notebook, about the words bravery and wondering, but I did not mention them yet. "I realized something," I said slowly. "I realized I ended things because I was afraid of uncertainty, not because I stopped loving you." The words felt heavy, but true. He did not look surprised. "I knew," he said quietly. That answer hurt more than I expected. "You knew?" "Yes." He nodded. "You always need to see the whole road before you take a step. And I was asking you to walk into fog." Walk into fog. The image felt accurate. "And you?" I asked. "Were you afraid?" "Of course," he said. "But I was more afraid of losing you than of moving." His honesty felt like fresh air, not dramatic, not pleading, just clear. For a moment, I imagined my mother sitting somewhere decades ago, facing Daniel, hearing similar words, feeling similar fear. Did she sit in a cafe like this? Did she stare at a future she could not control? I took a deep breath. "My mother had someone before my father," I said suddenly. The sentence surprised even me. Adam listened without interrupting. "I found a letter," I continued, "from a man she loved. She chose stability instead. She chose safety." "And?" he asked softly. "And I think she spent the rest of her life at peace, but sometimes wondering." The word hung between us, wondering. Adam leaned back. "Do you think she regretted it?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I don't want to spend my life asking what if." There it was, the truth. Not about him, not about travel, but about myself. I did not want to become someone who avoided risk so completely that curiosity turned into quiet regret. He looked at me carefully. "I am not asking you to promise anything," he said. "I just need to know if you're choosing this because you want it, not because you're afraid of repeating her story." His words were gentle, but direct. I thought about that carefully. Was I acting out of rebellion, trying to prove something? Or was I genuinely ready? I closed my eyes for a moment, and instead of imagining a perfect future, I imagined the simple reality. New city, new apartment, moments of loneliness, moments of excitement, uncertainty, but shared uncertainty. When I opened my eyes, I felt calm. "I'm not choosing you because of her," I said. "I'm choosing you because when I imagine my life without trying, that scares me more." The honesty surprised me. He reached across the table, not dramatically, just enough for our fingers to touch. "Trying is enough," he whispered. We did not make grand plans that afternoon. We did not book flights. We did not promise forever. We only agreed on one thing: to stop letting fear speak louder than love. As we walked along the river afterward, the wind was cool. The water moved steadily beside us. Life felt uncertain, but alive. When I returned home, I went straight to my mother's room. I opened the drawer again, took out the letter, then the notebook. I sat on the bed and read one final line from her journal: "I will choose peace, even if it means wondering." I held the letter in my hands, and I realized something new. My mother did not fail. She did not choose wrongly. She chose the version of peace that made sense to her at the time. She lived a life of quiet dignity, of devotion, of steady love. And because of her choice, I was here, standing at my own crossroad. But I did not have to choose exactly as she did. Love does not demand repetition, it invites awareness. I placed the notebook back in the drawer, but this time I kept the letter, not to hide it, not to hold on to the past, but as a reminder that love is never simple, that courage looks different in every generation, that safety is not always weakness, and risk is not always recklessness. That night, I packed a small box, not to move yet, just to prepare, a symbolic gesture, a quiet declaration to myself. I am willing to step into fog, not blindly, not foolishly, but consciously. As I lay in bed, I did not feel anxious. I felt awake, aware, connected to the woman my mother once was, and connected to the woman I was becoming, somewhere between peace and possibility, somewhere between safety and love. And for the first time, I understood something clearly. The letter did not change my mother's story. It changed how I read it. And in reading it differently, I began to write my own with a little more courage. 2 months later, I stood in the same bedroom again. But this time, there were half-packed boxes near the door. Not everything, just enough to show intention. Adam had found a small apartment in the new city. Nothing luxurious, just sunlight, wooden floors, and a balcony that overlooked a narrow street filled with trees. I had not resigned from my job yet. I had arranged remote work for 3 months, a trial period, a bridge between certainty and possibility. The old version of me would have needed guarantees, permanent contracts, signed agreements, detailed plans for 5 years. But this time, I allowed space for unfolding. I allowed life to breathe. On the dresser, my mother's letter rested neatly inside a simple frame. I had copied it carefully. The original remained safe in the drawer. But the copy stayed with me, not as a symbol of regret, as a symbol of awareness. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden. The roses were fading now, petals loosening, color softening. Nothing blooms forever, but that does not make the blooming less meaningful. My phone vibrated. A message from Adam. "Train arrives at 4. I can't wait." I smiled, not the nervous smile of someone running away, but the steady smile of someone stepping forward. Before closing the bedroom door, I sat on the edge of the bed one last time. I imagined my mother sitting there decades ago, holding Daniel's letter, facing her own uncertainty. I no longer saw her as someone who lacked courage. I saw her as someone who chose according to the tools she had, according to the fears she carried, according to the responsibilities she believed were hers, and perhaps according to the love she felt for a future child she had not yet met. Me. The realization no longer felt heavy. It felt sacred. Our parents' choices are not chains, they are foundations. We can build differently on top of them, but we must first understand them. I stood up and opened the drawer again. The notebook and the original letter were still there, carefully preserved. I ran my fingers along the paper once more. "Thank you," I whispered, not for choosing one man over another, but for showing me that love always involves risk. Even when we choose safety, there is always something we surrender and something we protect. That afternoon, the house felt quiet as I locked the door. Not empty, not abandoned, just complete. The drive to the station was calm. The sky stretched wide above the road. No dramatic music, no cinematic moment. Just a steady awareness that life was moving, and I was moving with it. When I saw Adam stepping off the train, carrying one suitcase and a hopeful expression, something inside me settled, not because the future was certain, but because my choice was conscious. He walked toward me. We didn't run. We didn't make a scene. We simply stood face to face. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. I nodded. "I'm not sure of everything," I said, "but I'm sure I don't want to live in fear." That was enough. We took a taxi to the apartment. The space was smaller than my mother's house, but filled with light. The balcony doors were open. A soft breeze moved through the curtains. I stepped inside slowly. This was not just a new place, it was a new version of myself. One willing to tolerate uncertainty, one willing to risk disappointment, one willing to build something without guarantees. That evening, as we unpacked plates and books and simple everyday things, I felt something unexpected. Peace, not the quiet peace of avoiding conflict, but the active peace of alignment, of knowing that my actions matched my heart. Later, when Adam fell asleep, I stepped onto the balcony alone. The street below glowed under soft lamps. Strangers walked by. Life continued. I thought about Daniel, a man I never met, a love that never fully lived. I wondered where he ended up, if he found happiness, if he ever stopped wondering. And then I realized something important. His story no longer belonged to me. My mother's story no longer defined me. They were part of my history, but not my limitation. The letter had changed how I see love, not by teaching me to choose passion over stability, not by telling me to reject safety, but by reminding me that love asks for honesty, and courage looks different in every season of life. Sometimes courage is staying, sometimes courage is leaving, sometimes courage is simply admitting what you truly want. I looked up at the night sky, and for the first time in months, I did not feel divided. I felt whole, because I had chosen with open eyes, with awareness of the cost, with acceptance of the risk. If this story has touched something in you, if you have ever faced a choice between safety and possibility, take a quiet moment to ask yourself, are you choosing from fear or from truth? There is no universal answer, only your answer. And sometimes all it takes to see clearly is an old letter waiting patiently in a drawer. Thank you for listening to this gentle English story. If you enjoy slow, reflective storytelling that helps you practice English while exploring life's deeper questions, consider subscribing to Gentle English Storytelling. Let stories unfold slowly, let love be honest, and let your choices be conscious.